This is a lecture called Fun with Strings, and I'm going to show you some neat things that we can do with the string class. String manipulation is very important. Almost every application that you're ever going to write is going to have to do some kind of parsing on strings, whether it's validating user input, translating flat files into databases, or vice versa. There's just so much usage that we get out of string data. So I've created a sample project here that shows you some neat things we can do with strings, some of the more common methods, and I'm going to walk through this with you. The first thing I want you to know is that strings are immutable, and this is a common interview question. What does immutable mean? Why are strings immutable? If we step into this method, I'm going to demonstrate that immutable, while it's a really fancy word, all it really means is that whenever you call a method on a string, like toUpper or toLower, something that will modify a string, it doesn't actually modify the variable that the string is in. It returns a brand new string. So if you want to store this information, you have to reassign it to the existing variable. And I'm going to demonstrate this here. We create a string that has the word hello in it, proper cased. Strings have a method called toUpper that will convert it to all uppercase letters. If I call that method, usually new developers think that the value of S1 will convert to all uppercase. That does not happen, as you can see down here, because strings are immutable. toUpper returns a new string. So when I print this out, it's still proper cased. Now on the next line, I'm reassigning the value of string 1 to string 1 toUpper. As soon as that line runs, you'll see that it does indeed convert to uppercase and then stores it in the existing variable. So when we print it out, it becomes all uppercase. The next method I want to demonstrate is comparing strings. And there's two different ways we basically compare strings. One is using double equal or not equal. So I have two strings here. One is lowercase high, one is uppercase high. Is string 1 not equal to string 2? And the answer is yes, because casing matters. String comparisons are case sensitive. However, string variables have a dot equals method on them. Dot equals will return a Boolean whether or not two strings are equal. Its default behavior, if I just said S1 dot equals S2, would be to do a case sensitive comparison. However, there is a second optional parameter that allows you to tell the equals method to ignore the current casing. So in this case, it's just going to see if the strings have the same letter regardless of case. So that will be true, and it will say that S1 is equal to S2. For our next example, I'm going to demonstrate that strings, just like arrays, have lengths and indexes. So let's jump into this code. Here I've created a string that has my name in it, Eric. If I want to grab just the first letter of my name, I can treat the string variable just like an array and grab the character from position 0. And that's going to print out the first letter is E. What if I want to print my name backwards? This is also a common interview question. Can you reverse a string? Well, one way to do that is to write a for loop starting at the length minus 1. Remember that arrays start from 0. The length property says how many letters are in the name. That is 4. However, the character positions go from 0 to 3. So we always have to remember to subtract 1 from the length. So if we go from length minus 1, we stop when we get to 0, we decrement every time. You will see as we walk through this loop that we start printing the letters in reverse order. Strings also have a useful function called substring. Substring has two variants. The first variant takes a single integer as a parameter. And what this substring method will do is start at the character at position 1 and then return all of the characters after that, including position 1. So name substring 1 should return RIC, which it does. The second variant of substring takes two parameters. The first one is where to start, and the second one is how many characters to return. So name.length minus 2, comma 2 means start at the second to last character and print both of them. So in this case, it's going to print just I and C. The next method is about casing and white space. So if we want to handle these, there's a couple different things we can do. Here I've created a string that has no data in it. Whenever you see two double quotes, that means an empty string. You can also use a method called string.empty, which will also create an empty string. So here, I'm going to ask, does the string have any data? And the string class has a method called isNull or empty. If you pass a string into that method, it will return true or false based on whether that string has data in it or is null. It's a very commonly used function. And in this case, because S1 is set to an empty string, that's going to return true. The next bit of code, I've created a string that has the letters A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and they're all in mixed case. And I've decided to print out the original string, the string converted to uppercase, and the string converted to lowercase. And you can see that that prints out just fine. We often use two upper and two lower when dealing with users, because if they're entering data like menu options or things like that, oftentimes for string comparison purposes, we want to make sure everything is upper or lowercase because we don't want to have to deal with converting everything to culture invariant. So the string class has some methods. The character class also has some useful methods. Let's look into those. I've created a character with just the letter A. We can print that character out. And then here are a bunch of Boolean methods that are on the character class. Oftentimes when we're writing code, we want to know whether the user typed in a digit, a letter, letters or digits, whether something is upper or lowercase, punctuation, white space. The character class has built-in methods that handle all of this for us. And we can walk through these and you can see that it's parsing that A and telling us all the information we'd want to know about it. Now let's look at some ways we can edit strings. So opening this method, I've got a string that has a bunch of extra spaces on both sides. I can use the trim method to remove those spaces. So you'll see that after we reassign it using the trim function and print it out, those spaces are gone. Strings also have a replace method, very commonly used. The first parameter is what string you're looking for. The second parameter is what string to replace it with. You have to be a little careful with this because if you don't put the first parameter correctly, it will match every single instance of that in the string. So sometimes you can replace things by accident that you didn't intend to. But I often use replace for doing things like removing punctuation, removing characters that aren't allowed to be entered by the user. It's good for all those things. After this method runs, it's going to take the word got and it's going to replace it with the word have. So we run that, we print it out, and you see that it did. The last functionality I want to demonstrate is the split and join methods. Split and join are most commonly used when dealing with flat file information or data transfers from other systems. So here I've got a string that says this is a sentence. And then I've created an array of string called words. And I'm going to set that equal to s1.split space. The split method takes a string and looks for what we call a delimiter. That is a single character that we want to split the string on. So in this case, the delimiter is a space. And it's going to look at the string this space is space a space sentence. And everywhere there's a space, it's going to split that string and put that word into the array at an element. So after we run this, I want you to look at the locals window down here. Words became a string array of length 4 because there are 4 words because there were 3 spaces. And every element of that array has its own word. So now we can use our for each loop and we can loop through here and we can print out the words in the sentence one at a time. Very useful. If you're working with Excel, you can save an Excel sheet as a comma separated values CSV file, and that means that each column will have a comma in between it. So if you want to parse that data with C#, you can read it in one row at a time and split on the comma. The join method allows us to undo a split. String.join takes a string and then takes an array, and it will walk through each element of that array and build the string back up and put whatever string you passed in as the first parameter in between them. So in this case, I'm going to take all the words in my sentence and I'm going to join them back together in a single string and put a comma between them instead of a space. And you can see how that turned out. So splitting takes it apart, puts it into an array. Join takes an array and puts it back into a single string. So you can see we have a lot of useful methods in C# for working with string data.